Hi all, this is Kaushal Raman. I'm a product manager of the virtualized network services team at Verizon, specifically responsible for managing the lifecycle of virtualized network services on Cisco platforms. Also, I'm responsible for um, the management of virtual services on public cloud platforms as well. Today, me and my colleague Ashwin will be presenting um, on the track orchestration, automation, and NFV innovation. We'll be talking specifically about simplifying network orchestration. Ashwin, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Kaushal. Welcome, everyone. Look forward to the session with all on the call. My name is Ashwin. I'm a technical product manager at Verizon. I deal with the automation of all the services that we offer in Verizon, specifically with respect to provisioning as well as assurance. And look forward to the discussion we have ongoing. Thank you. Back to Kaushal.
All right. Thanks, Ashwin. Let me start presenting this. Okay, team. So we are going to be talking about how have we worked at Verizon to simplify network orchestration for the virtualized network services that we have deployed, and also for the services that we are in the process of developing as far as our roadmap goes. Okay, so this is the proprietary statement. This is just to make sure that whatever we discuss and share as part of this forum stays in this forum and is not exposed outside of this forum. Okay, so as part of today's topic, this is what we want to cover. We want to cover why SDN is the future, what are the advantages of software-defined networking. I think majority of the audience in this forum knows what that is, but we just want to level set why is it so important before venturing into the next topic, which is all about Verizon virtual network services. As far as Verizon goes, what does the virtual network services stack contain? What are the features, specifications that we have? What are the options that we have made available to the customer? Basically, the entire virtual network services stack overview. Then we go deeper into the approach that we have taken at Verizon to automate service orchestration, which is basically to provide a world-class experience for as far as service delivery goes to our customers. And once the approach is completed, we want to go deeper into discussing the different steps in that approach. Like how have we enabled a single orchestration process across all the virtualized services that Verizon deploys across multiple platforms. And how have we done it? So basically, we've automated a lot through zero-touch provisioning. So we will also talk about how does zero-touch provisioning work at Verizon, what are the values gained through zero-touch provisioning, and so on and so forth. Why is zero-touch provisioning important? Basically, addressing the problems that we've heard from our customers around service delivery and using zero-touch provisioning to solve those problems across multiple use cases. We will go through some common use cases that we have catered to for our customers, how virtualized network services has helped those customers increase their network transformation targets, as well as agility with respect to how we deploy the services. So let's start. As majority of you guys know, SDN is transforming the industry primarily because of the fact that there is a lot of industry dynamics at play. We constantly hear from our customers around their changing network patterns. A lot of our customers want different network patterns to satisfy their needs dependent on what their requirements really are. Right? So that forces service providers like Verizon and some of our competitors to deliver more than just access pipes. We have to deliver more, we have to add more value to the access pipes. Absolutely, majority of the network services that we've been providing historically has been commoditized. So we have to create a differentiation in what we offer by building more intelligence and interoperability in the network. That includes interoperability amongst the transport piece, the virtualized network piece, the hardware piece, along with the orchestration and the assurance pieces working on top of it. Also, our customers have diverse network options. It's basically a fragmented network that they have, where some of the sites may require virtual network services on hardware platforms. Some of them will need virtual network services on cloud platforms as a data center option. So there, our customers' needs are all fragmented. So we need to be able to provide them with a solution that caters to all their needs, but delivering a very high-class service, which creates that stickiness as far as our service model goes with our customers. So what is the Verizon SDN vision? So our vision is basically delivering the value of an integrated system. And what that means is what I want to talk about on this slide. So we will work this slide from bottom to the top. So there are multiple ways of delivering the SDN vision. One can deliver a very monolithic approach where you deliver a technology solution, like a routing solution or an SD-WAN solution. One can actually resell that technological solution to the customer, but that does not have interoperability between different components like routing plus SD-WAN offered in a service chain. There's no integration between products, and there is no operated added value of automating the service delivery experience and automating the service assurance experience. When you move one level up, which is the platform piece, well, now you can deliver the product on a platform, but again, from the perspective of the customer, there is no choice of platforms offered. Again, these products are delivered in a fragmented way. There is no service chaining between these products. So the operator value that is provided to the customer from the lens that we see is very moderate. But when you get to the integrated ecosystem, which is what we want to talk about, and which is the SDN vision that Verizon offers eventually to its customers, is it's a very open framework. Basically, what we tell our customers is you can choose the platform that you want the virtual network services on. The customer chooses the platform, and then they have a variety of options. They can choose SD-WAN, they can choose routing, they have a variety of network solutions with the option of chaining them, service chaining them. So there is integration between all the layers of the service delivery model. You have the hardware layer, you have the hypervisor layer, then you also have the virtual services layer with the ability of chaining those virtual services together. And on top of it, there is value-added services with respect to automated orchestration, service assurance with the SLAs that we provide as part of our managed services stack. So that's the integrated ecosystem option that Verizon delivers as part of its SDN vision. And we will talk about this option in much more detail in the subsequent slides. Excuse me. So how do we make our Verizon SDN vision real? Right? So it's very simple. At the end of the day, the services that we provide at Verizon, we want our users who are our customers to be able to connect to their applications which are hosted anywhere through our virtual network services, which are delivered over a variety of options. As you can see at the bottom of the slide, virtual network services can be delivered over private and public MPLS, as well as private and public internet, as well as wireless technologies like LTE. How do we want to do it? At Verizon, we want to do it in a way which is very impactful to the customer. We want to deploy these services at speed with very less touch from a customer standpoint and very less touch from the Verizon operations standpoint also to manage it, and giving that ability to the customer to change these services on demand, right? So that's where the elasticity and the value proposition comes into picture. And how do we want to do it? We want to deploy at speed by using our fully automated network services provisioning and service delivery process, which is what we're going to be expanding upon. We have policy-based healing with continuous learning that provides the ability to detect problems before they occur and when they occur, and provide that automated healing component which will fix the problem through the deployment of our service assurance templates whenever these problems happen. And change on demand. This is basically providing the customer the option of choosing different solutions across different vendors and having the option of changing the different service packages that are available across those different solutions with no lock-ins. And automated service delivery is the key to delivering this vision. That's where we create the ultimate customer service experience that we desire. Excuse me. So in this slide, what I want to bring to the fore is we work this slide from the bottom to the top again. Basically, multiple deployment options available to the customer. Multiple deployment options as in being able to deliver the service across multiple networks. Multiple deployment models. There is a universal CPE model, there is a cloud model. And within the universal CPE, the customer has the option of picking multiple CPE vendors. And on top of it, again, the customer has the ability to choose any network solution, routing, SD-WAN, security, WAN optimization, and within those network solutions, they can choose the vendor of their choice based upon what their preferences really are. So that's on top of it, if you overlay the entire service and network orchestration, closed loop service assurance, providing a highly digital experience to the customer, providing a single pane of glass for management, and also providing technologies where we can provide that intelligent application layer and the entire stack, wrapped around with end-to-end security. That's the value proposition that we want to provide. So basically, the message from this slide that I want you guys to take away is it's a very open platform that we provide. We provide the customer the option to choose what they want, in which deployment platform they want, and being provisioned over the option of the network that they want, whether it is public, private, or wireless. Having said that, let me move to the next slide, and I would request my colleague Ashwin to take over and talk about the Verizon Service Orchestration Lifecycle and the details behind it. Ashwin.
Great, thanks, Kaushal. So yeah, let's talk about this, right? So when we talk about service orchestration, right, what we're doing, as Kaushal mentioned in the previous slides, is all that simplification that we're bringing in to our customers is met with a lot of challenges, as some of you may have experienced who are watching this the seminar. Basically, what you look at is, from a service orchestration perspective, there are three phases if you look at it. There's a VNF onboarding phase, there's a service automation phase, and then, of course, ending it up with service assurance. So in the VNF onboarding, let's take each phase at a time. In VNF onboarding, what we typically expect is a standards-based orchestration. Now, let's look at some of those standards-based orchestration, what it means. Typically, from an onboarding perspective, what we have is you need to onboard the VNF onto your platform, be it OpenStack, be it public cloud, and of course, public cloud being Azure, Google, there's so many, right, AWS. So we need to manage that, and then we need to validate those services, those VNFs. Not just the fact that I can onboard it, but does it really work the way it's supposed to be working? And what are some of those challenges that you can experience is basically VNFs are not standardized, right? What that results in is vendor-specific onboarding requirements. As a simple fact is some of the VNFs, some of the vendor VNFs, if I will, they basically have cloud init files as a way to completely automatically bring up the application at the time of launch. On the other hand, there are other applications that don't have a cloud init and require specific configuration post the bring up of the VNF. So that's where you have a lot of these vendor-specific onboarding. And then, now let's say you've onboarded the VNF, you need to manage the life cycle of that VNF. Where is the complexity there? Well, the complexity there is not just about onboarding that VNF, but it's also managing the automation with respect to that VNF. A lot of times what you may experience is you may bring up the VNF, but little do you realize that this version 2 that's come out with the VNF is breaking the closed loop, as an example. So that's one of the challenges. Then, as we've talked about, as Kaushal has rightly talked about, is onboarding VNFs in various deployment models, right? You have VMs, you have containers, right? And then we have talking about a multi-cloud environment. It's not just about a private cloud anymore, private, public, and then of course you have PNFs as well. And like in the SD-WAN case, you basically have the PNF sitting behind a controller. So there's these complexities that need to be managed. Then you have a functional and performance testing. Now, it's not just functional and performance testing. The important factor is the fact that it's a multi-vendor environment and it's a multi-cloud environment and the abstraction involved related to that. Now let's look at service automation. From service automation perspective, it's effectively the onboarding of the service and then provisioning of the service. A typical challenge that you would expect is you need to enable quick launch of network services in days and weeks, which again, depending on the service chain, it doesn't necessarily lead to that. Again, with some of the complexities that we just talked about from the VNF perspective. Then we need to do validation of service chains. As you can imagine, there's interoperability that we need to validate between these VNFs, which is not simple. In some cases, there may need to be tweaks in terms of configuration that we need to apply. Then again, we just talked about it. We need to deploy the services in deployment, various deployment models, right? You've got the VCP, you've got white box, you've got gray box, multi-cloud environment. All these different environments need to be handled. Now, the other part is you need to manage a standard list of service templates, right? What does that mean? At the end of the day, if I need to sell my services, I need to be service ready, right? And in order to be service ready, I need to maintain a standard list of service templates and the complexity that arises with it. Because now, anytime there's an onboarded VNF that has a new version, I need to maintain the service as well. Now, let's go into the service assurance aspect of it. Now, service assurance, of course, as we all know, faults and performance monitoring is an absolute must. That's the base behind it. But then there's also the aspect of once I correlate that fault or once I correlate that performance to a particular fault, do I have the ability to self-recover, a closed loop healing as we talk about it, right? Now, for that, what are some of the key challenges we may face? Service topology, right? We need to match it to the network. As you can imagine, there's a lot of things that the customer or the user, delivery user can do on the network. And the question is, how do you manage that feed back into the assurance system? So you need automatic feed and audit capabilities to manage that. The other part is ability to monitor end-to-end virtual network service SLAs. It's not just about the virtual network service. Now you have the virtual network service residing on the cloud. So you need to make sure that the network is in the proper way in order to meet your specific SLAs. As an example, if I have a private cloud and my switch that's basically getting my switch on the router that's basically getting my service out of the data center, if that's down, even though I may be monitoring the virtual network service, I'm down. So I need to maintain that end-to-end virtual network service visibility. Now, the other part of this is ability to perform RCA. If you think about it, in this case, it's not just about the application. Yes, we may get SNMP traps from the device. Yes, we may be able to SNMP pull the device. Absolutely. But now beyond the application, you have the virtual instance that comes into play. You have the hypervisor that comes into play. And of course, the virtual ports that come into play. How do you manage the RCA across those entities, right? Now let's look into managing service assurance automated policy. Well, it seems just trivial for all of us to look at it and say, yes, automated policy, absolutely, that's what we want to do. But then the complexity that arises is vendor-specific requirements. Now what you have is, as an example, let's say I apply closed loop. Depending on the nature of the closed loop, there may be an impact to license. Now, you would say that licenses can be handled, but then now we need to think about, based on the vendor, there may be vendor-specific license requirements and how they need to be managed. So we need to handle all that, right? So maybe we can go into the next slide and talk about it. What does Verizon do? So Verizon is basically looking at a multi-level automation approach for each of these different phases we just talked about. So from a VNF onboarding perspective, we have automated vendor-agnostic tests, right? So effectively, we've abstracted that vendor-specific information, and now we're driving the automation behind it. And then we've got VNF type feature validation. So within a VNF type itself, let's say a router or a switch or an SD-WAN device, you'll see a lot of feature variation depending on the vendor that you're looking at. We need to be able to validate that feature and across multi-cloud, right? The next part of it is VNF template repo. So what we have done is basically created a repository through our testing, through our validation cycle, to be able to create that repository and basically do an auto validation. So it's not just the fact that I can create a VNF template. Think of it as an example of, if I get a new version of VNF, can I validate at least the fact that I'm able to orchestrate the VNF? and that I'm able to log into the device, right? Those are some of the basic things. Of course, it goes into much more detail, but you can start with that. Then look at service automation. So service automation, basically what we're looking at is a plug-and-play deployment, right? We are talking about the dynamic service design. So it's not just the fact of that I have a template repository, which I'm mentioning in the next point, but I also need an ability where users can come in and create very specific designs that they have for their customer. That's an important part of this. The next aspect, and I wouldn't say next because it's a foundation for it, is Etsy-based service and resource orchestration. So to maintain that level of abstraction where the resource orchestrator manages the complexity with respect to the multi-cloud, and the service orchestration provides the flexibility to my users where they can define designs dynamically. Config management, a very key aspect when it comes to VNFs, is ability to do a management, a configuration, and an audit capability for the configs. And then, of course, we just talked about it, a version management. So you've got licenses in there, you've got the VNF versions to be managed in there, all of it, that's comprised in this version management piece. Then we look at service assurance. In the service assurance piece, what we've got is automated provisioning. So we are able to feed that information that provisioning has created into the assurance system. Dynamic bandwidth, so the ability to manage the bandwidth of those VNFs based on realities that we see in the network. And then, of course, last but not the least is the dynamic closed loop policy. Those are, again, we can integrate with AI and ML, which we're actually in the process of looking at right now, and become more proactive closed loop rather than a reactive closed loop. So as we just talked about, there's adaptive management that comes into play as an orchestration lifecycle. So typically in three categories: resiliency, optimization, and defense. So resiliency, of course, what we talked about just a little while back, is scaling on demand. As the customer requires that service to be scaled up, we have an ability to scale up. And also the other aspect is to expand the predictive aspect of it. So to predict the nature of that service and say that we expect this customer to have a service, a requirement to increase their service need between this time, and to be able to then scale up on that need or prior to that need occurring. Optimization. So it's not just the fact of resiliency, but it's also optimizing the networks. Especially when you're talking about public cloud, the question is, do I just want to leave the resources as it is? If there is a way that I can scale down or scale up on demand, then that would be the ideal for the customer. And of course, with that, what comes is optimization of the performance. Then we go into the defense. As you can imagine, from a virtual network service, that's a very key and critical piece to ensuring the secure network service, right? So what we want to do is a network enforced security policy. Again, a lot of that will depend on what the customer requires, but for us to be able to manage those policies based on the service deployment. And then the ability to isolate abnormal behavior. Next. So here what we're talking about is lifecycle stages as it typically occurs in service provisioning. So what we've done is categorize it into three phases, which is the NFVI provisioning and configuration, VNF provisioning and configuration, and then the monitoring and self-healing, which we just talked about. So the NFVI provisioning and configuration, as you can just see, what it's talking about is it's a receipt of the UCPE, and then going into the OpenStack setup and configuration. A lot of that configuration, I won't go into a lot of the details, but talking about a lot of that configuration and the connectivity piece that I need to establish for my white box in order for me to proceed into the next phase, which is a VNF provisioning and configuration. So for the VNF provisioning and configuration, as we just talked about before, it's about leveraging that golden or base configuration, right? So I already have a repository of validated templates, blueprints, as we refer to in Verizon. We use that to basically then provision the service. So you're talking about an automated network setup, the controllers to be provisioned in the case of the SD-WAN VNFs, and then going into the actual provisioning of the VNF. Now, as these are provisioned and configured, what we need to do is to make sure that we go into the assurance system and be able to push the information into the Assure one. So We have a push and a pull mechanism in a short one, but we essentially establish that. Once we've done that, what we need to do is to manage the lifecycle of that service through a snapshot. So what we're doing is basically ensuring that we have a snapshot. In the event that a closed loop is required, we be able to revert back into the old, into the instance back to where it was, right? If it went into an error state, we are able to go back in time and say, yes, we're able to recover this, we end up back to where it was. So that's the key aspects when it comes to the orchestration lifecycle. And one of the key pieces to the NFVI is a ZTP. So when we talk about ZTP, it's an automation solution designed to save time in operations. What are we talking about here? What we're talking about here is essentially making the deployment of CP a plug and play. And the question is, how do we do that? We'll talk about that in a bit. So what we do here is, as we talked about in the previous slide, what we're talking about is an automated management of that configuration and the license of that UCP. And of course, it goes into the software updates that would be required for the UCP as well. So traditionally, if you look at provisioning, we're talking about a multi-step process for CP deployments. Pre-provisioning followed by shipping to customer location. And essentially, it's a time-consuming approach because now you have to collaborate IT, network, logistics, network, customer to make sure that you've got the right configuration in place for the CPE. So what has Verizon done? So what we have done is basically that the CPE is delivered to the customer, of course. Once they power it up, the device automatically will establish a secure connection with the Verizon ZTP server. And what then it does is the orchestration system then says, oh, I see the UCP has come up. Now I can apply the specific configuration and licenses to bring up the device, right? And now, at this point, we can say the CP is ready for VNF activation. Now, this picture where it talks about how the ZTP essentially works. So essentially what we're talking about is the CPE through the WAN connection establishes a connectivity to the ZTP gateway, and how it does that is via either a Verizon or a third-party internet, or Verizon or International Wireless, and of course a Verizon MPLS. So this is done in various phases in Verizon. And then essentially what it's doing is it's establishing a connectivity to the orchestration service. So the orchestration service can then apply specific configurations, as we just talked about, into the device directly. At this point, I'll hand it back over to Kaushal.
Hey, thanks, Ashwin. That was very detailed description of how we've thought about network service orchestration at Verizon, and how do we go about believing in the fact that automating service delivery is a key value proposition in delivering that customer experience which we want to deliver, and every customer wants that. Also, it simplifies our operations processes as well. So thanks a lot for that. Obviously, why do we do all this, right? So it's absolutely an issue of scale because for enterprise customers, we have hundreds, and in some cases, thousands of sites where we have to deploy these virtual network services across different deployment models. You know, it can be on a CP, it can be on a cloud, like you saw. So it becomes very, very important for us to use zero-touch provisioning as well as the entire network service orchestration piece for us to automate this entire service delivery process for our customers. And using such processes, we have deployed thousands of virtual network services in production right now. They are functional, they are operational for our customers, and we do plan to take it to 10,000 of them by the end of this year and more in the next few years to come. So in short, just trying to present a picture or present a visual of what are the various deployment options that we're talking about for virtualized network services. Basically, we have multiple options. We have the universal CPE option on the left-hand side. Then we also have hosted network services, which is the Verizon private cloud. And we also have the public cloud option, where we can deploy virtual network services at. And across these different deployment options, we have the ability to use diverse network or transport layers, which can be Verizon or third-party provided public networks, as well as Verizon and third-party provided private networks. And on top of it, overlaying all of this is our centralized service orchestration piece. So as you can see, our service orchestration piece works across these multiple deployment models, across these multiple networking options, simplify the entire delivery process. And additional to that, we also have a centralized management and control piece for command and control purposes. So a couple of quick examples of use cases and customers whom we have deployed our virtualized network services to, and what sort of an impact has it created in their business, right? So we have an insurance services company. Obviously, they inspire to grow in their lines of businesses. They have certain limitations in the fact that they had legacy network. It limited their ability to meet the expectations of their customers. So they came to us. So we went ahead and we deployed virtual network services across hundreds of offices in more than 30 countries. And we did use all the brilliant concepts that Ashwin went through, zero touch provisioning, completely service delivery automation to deploy and meet their aggressive network transformation delivery timelines. And basically by doing that, we were able to satisfy the requirements, and they were able to also go forward with their network transformation targets, as well as for meeting the requirements of their customers. In addition to that use case, we also had a publishing company who wanted to take their global business on course for a connected future, basically wanted to expand their business and growth. For them, we helped by implementing SD-WAN application-aware networks across their managed private IP and internet transport spaces. By doing this, we were able to double their US capacity with automatic routing via internet or MPLS. We were also able to achieve around 60% of the customer's targeted reduction per MB. So these are small examples of the amount of successes and key transformation targets that we could achieve for these customers by the deployment of virtual network services. Having said that, that brings us to the end of this presentation, and Ashwin and I are ready to take any questions you may have. Thanks so much for the opportunity for having us present at this year's NFV World Congress.
Yeah, thank you very much, everyone.
Thanks a lot.